Hi everyone, it's Jamie here from anysoftwareyouwant.com. I have over 50 tools to skyrocket your business and thousands of users. So if you want to skyrocket your website to #1 on Google or supercharge your email campaign, come and visit anysoftwareyouwant.com. In this video, I am going to give to you what I believe to be the most advanced, full, free course on the internet for increasing your open rates and inbox rates when doing cold and scraped email campaigns. So why should you listen to me? First of all, I've been in the internet marketing business for over 15 years. That's a mix of SEO, social, and a lot of emailing. I've sent literally millions of emails. So that's emails for big companies, emails for small companies, emails for my own businesses in affiliate marketing, in SaaS as well. So I've seen a real mix of email campaigns and strategies over the years. I'm also at the level of executive VIP on the world's largest internet marketing forum, and that isn't a level you can simply buy your way into. That is a level that you can only get to by the votes of your peers. And finally, if you head over to anysoftwareyouwant.com, you can see the level of expertise that I have just simply by the software that's available on there. Not trying to big myself up too much, but I just want you guys to know, you're listening to someone that has considerable experience in this area. Now, the first thing I have to say about this course, it is advanced. It's designed for people that have already done email marketing campaigns. If you're completely new to email marketing, you will get a lot of value from this course, but you'll probably find yourself having to pause it a lot and Google things, and that might be a bit frustrating for you. So if you're a beginner, this probably isn't the right course for you, but if you've sent email campaigns before, you're going to get a lot from this. And one more thing before we begin, if you are doing cold email campaigns, and especially if you're using scraped emails, please make sure you stay within the laws of your country. I'm not a lawyer, this is not legal advice, but generally speaking, B2C with cold and scraped emails is illegal. Please do not do it. And again, I'm not a lawyer, this is not legal advice. B2B, generally speaking, is okay to cold email and use scraped emails. So let's begin. First, name extraction. So what we mean by that is basically most email addresses have people's names in them, particularly if it's a business email. Now, when you're cold emailing or you're using scraped emails, you probably don't have that information, but really you do because it's part of the email. So there's a ton of software out there where you can just put in your emails and it will run through those emails and extract the most likely first name. And the reasons why you'd want that are pretty obvious. You'll have a higher open rate if their name is in the subject. It feels less spammy if you're addressing them by their name in the content instead of like hello and then a pitch. You can say hi and then their name and then a pitch. Feels less spammy, feels more personal. Also sometimes feels like there's some sort of prior relationship if they know your name, so they're less likely to mark you as spam, I think, and again you get a better open rate. And if you know someone's name, there's some spam filters that they don't publish their algorithms, but I think they give you a slight edge in the spam score that they give you if you know that person's name. So just to give you a really quick example of what this would look like, I'm going to use my own name extraction software simply because I know it works, and it's literally completely free and the full version is available at the moment. So we'll just use it for this video because it's easy to demo. So I've stuck in some random email addresses here. I've selected the countries that my list probably consists of. We click start and we're going to run through top 2,000 names in the selected countries, and we're going to see if we can extract them from our tiny email list here. And then we've come back a few minutes later, a few seconds later, and you can see we've extracted the first name from all of these emails and the probable second name as well. Number 2, we have the classic re and forward trick. So that's where you put re and forward at the start of your email subject, because it makes it look like you're replying or you're forwarding on an email. Now, this is, I would consider this a little bit deceptive. I think what you'll find is, or what I found from my testing, is that it will increase your open rates, but it will also increase your complaint rates. So I think if you have a campaign where you're willing to tolerate an increase in complaint rates because you're cold emailing and you're rotating through IPs and domains, then that may be acceptable for you. But if you're mailing from one domain and one IP and you're trying to have a consistent, solid reputation on that domain and IP, I probably wouldn't do that, because it will increase your complaint rates. People will see re, they'll open it, and then they'll quickly realize, oh, I don't know this person, they've kind of tricked me here, and they'll mark you as spam. Here's another little trick you can do. So once you know someone's first name, you can normally convert that into a gender. Now, it's pretty obvious why you want to do that, because the more you know about the person you're emailing, the more likely you are to get their interest, get them to open the email, get them to click through, get them to convert, etc., etc. So I'll just give you a quick demo of how we do that with one of my bits of software, but obviously there is loads of other software out there that can do this as well. But I know this is quick and easy to show you, and again, it's free. So we're entering a little list, we select the countries that our list members are probably from, we click start, and it's going to run through the top 2,000 names, extract the names, and then we're going to convert them to their likely genders. So here you go. We have our list, and you can see the likelihood of James being male is 100%, Tim 100%, Tim again 100%, Rachel 100%, Rachel 100%. You can see we've extracted the names and we've converted them into genders. So now we can send quite personalized emails to these people, because we've gone from having just an email address to having their name, their gender, and for some products, knowing their gender can make such a big difference. So number 4, so we're going to get quite technical now, and you'd probably only do this if you were a programmer yourself, or you had access to a development team for the company you work for that's sending these emails. So one of the things you can do that helps avoid spam filters when you're doing cold emailing is to make every email you send really, really unique. And one of the ways that you can do that is if you have a business's domain, which you probably do because you have their email address, you can write some code to basically load that domain, extract as much information out of that domain as possible, and then use that to generate a really custom, unique email. And because that email is so unique, it's much harder for it to get flagged as spam, and also won't get flagged as bulk. So some email providers like Outlook, etc., even if they don't flag you as spam, they'll still flag you as a legitimate email but a bulk sender. And often when there's a little like bulk label that's put on the email, and as soon as people see that, they know, okay, that's not an important email. It's not spammy, but it's not important, so I'm just going to ignore it. So there's many different ways you can do this. You can load the website's content and then search for about pages and things like that, contact pages, and you can get their address out of that. And if they have an about page, you can figure out a ton of information about a business from an about page. It's really, because that's literally what it's for. So once you have all that information extracted from the website, you can feed it into a large language model. So you can feed it into ChatGPT, that's the best one, but if you don't want to incur high API costs because you're sending a ton of emails, you can run locally something like Llama and then just call it locally. And doing that, it really is as simple as a bit of code like this. You tell it what you're trying to do. That's from a previous thing I was doing where I was using large language models to parse email replies to see if people were giving the response I wanted to get. So you just put the payload together, fire it off to Llama locally, yeah, and that's it. And if you want to get even more advanced, you can do things like fingerprinting a tech stack. So if you're doing cold email, you can do things like look at the website's HTML to see what CMS they're using. Is it HubSpot? Is it WordPress? And that's really useful if it's some sort of tech service outreach that you're doing. And then if it's not anything tech related and the tech stack that they're on isn't useful, you can do things like grabbing their website's HTML and then looking for social links inside it, such as Instagram and LinkedIn, and you can follow those links, and you can even pull content from their LinkedIn company page and their latest social posts, and you can feed all of that along with their About Me page all into a large language model, and you can just generate some really unique emails that look like a person wrote them. So let's move on to number 5, country customization. So if you've got an email address, you'll have a business domain in it. You can load that website, and of course you automate this in code. You load the website and you can look for an address on the website, and that'll tell you their country. You can also look at the TLD, so that's the extension in the domain name, and if it's someone that signed up on your website, but obviously you don't normally ask for people's country when they sign up, but you do sometimes record their IP address. You can convert that IP address that they signed up with into a country. Now, the reason it's useful to have someone's country is pretty obvious. The more you know about them, the more you can personalize the email, and the higher your open and click-through rates will be. Also, you're not only going to customize the content. For example, how you market your product to someone in Australia might be completely different to how you market it in America. And also, if you have their country, you can do all kinds of cool things, like the pages they click through to can be customized for a country with different backgrounds and things like that. But the other reason that having the country is useful is because if you're testing opening times, that's really going to depend on the country, isn't it? So the opening times that you test depend on the country the person is from. For example, you probably wouldn't want to send an email to someone and it land in their inbox on a Monday morning, because they're going to have so many emails to deal with over the weekend. You probably want to send it something like, every campaign's different, but what you'll probably find is somewhere like Wednesday in the afternoon or something like that. So I'll give you a really quick example of extracting the country via the domain name from an email address. So I've just Googled a random list of restaurants, some in America, some in the UK. We're not going to use the IP address because we're going to pretend we don't have it. We're just going to look at the TLD and the domain. So we start our check, and then this system is loading the HTML of these web pages, websites, and we're looking at the about pages and the contact pages to see if we can reliably extract an address and convert that to a country. So you can see here we've used TLD to find the country here in the UK, and on these ones we loaded the HTML of the websites, and we've got the website from the domain obviously, and then we found a country within the website's HTML. That'll either be on the home page, the about page, or the contact page. Now you see we couldn't always find one with every domain. That's pretty normal. Some businesses don't have their address on their website, or they have it in a confusing format that we can't parse. But what you'll find is, at the moment, we're extracting these addresses using regex and code and looking for postcodes and things like that. But what you'll find soon is, because I'm about to upgrade this system, is that these the information from those web pages, the contact page, etc., that'll be fed into large language models, and different you'll be able to call ChatGPT API and pass all that information in, and that'll be way more reliable and accurate for giving you addresses. So yeah, keep an eye on this space, because it's going to get pretty interesting pretty quickly. Something else I wanted to touch on really quickly: email warm-up services. So this is a service you pay for, and it will basically send emails from your email address to popular email providers such as Gmail and Live.com, and it will be sent to the email warm-up services email accounts on there that they've created, and they will basically make it look like people are really interested in your emails, and it will boost your domain and IP reputation. They'll basically give your emails that you're sending positive engagement signals, and that'll be fed back to the Gmail AI, etc., and it will increase your domains and your IP's reputation scores. Now, some people say that these don't work, and I think the people that say they don't work, I think what possibly might be happening there is that they use these services, they get their domain and IP to have a decent reputation using them, but then they go out and blast a lot of spammy emails, and spam filters are really good now at differentiating between a legitimate email and a spammy email coming from the same sender, because that often does happen. You'll have a legitimate website that might have an old version of WordPress that gets hacked, and then they're sending out a mix of hacked, dodgy emails alongside their legitimate emails that customers want from the same domain and from the same IP. So over the years, spam filters have got really good at recognizing individual email campaigns. So I think that's possibly why some people haven't had a good experience with them. But yeah, as always, test everything, and see what you think. Number 7. So how are people actually sending emails these days? What is their sending infrastructure? So I think we can break this down into 4 main categories. So what most people are doing for cold emailing now is, think of it as spread sending. They're taking a few domains, and it's not their main domain or their business domain. So if your business is like cheese.com, then you might buy cheese outreach or cheeseemail.com, something related to your business but not your main domain. So they're taking some, we can call them burner domains, and then they're slowly sending from those domains, and they're sending from multiple inboxes from those domains. So they're basically spreading out their cold outreach over multiple domains using multiple inboxes. And the reason this works is because you're basically staying under the radar of these spam filters. Because if you're not sending a huge amount of emails from an inbox or a domain, then there's not a lot of data to sort of predict how spammy your outreach is, or there's not a lot of data to generate engagement signal analysis from. And the other reason that it works is because if you have a domain with, say, 5 inboxes, and each of those 5 inboxes sending, so I don't know, 20 emails a day, that looks like it's not an automated system. That looks like that inbox might belong to just a real person at a real company sending real emails that aren't cold outreach. Now, when people are doing this spread sending method, we'll call it, They typically use something like Instantly that will automate this for you, and they will also manage the IP addresses that you're sending from. So obviously you put your own domains in there, and then they will send the emails from certain IP addresses. So that's the IP address that connects to the recipient's mail server. They will monitor the reputation score of those IP addresses, and then they will swap them out if they've been flagged as spammy or having any sort of deliverability issues. Now, the other email service provider that people are using to do this spread sending is G Suite. And the reason for that is because you can do cold B2B outreach through G Suite as long as your complaint rates aren't very high, and obviously you're sharing IP addresses with everyone that uses Google Workspace and Gmail, and Google is a massive email provider now, so their IP addresses get a huge amount of volume through there, and you don't really have to worry about IP reputation. You just have to make sure that your spam score is reasonably low and you're not sending too many emails from each domain and inbox. Now, it's worth touching on some of the other ways people are sending emails. Obviously, these ways aren't as popular. There's a method, I call it spam boxing. Someone described it to me once, and at first I thought it was kind of stupid, I'll be honest. They were just like going into people's spam and not caring that they were landing in their spam folder. And the guy's logic was, well, yeah, sure, people won't read my emails as much, but if I don't care if I go into the spam, I can send so many emails, like I can send millions, and also if I know I'm going to go into the spam, I can use all kinds of content and titles to optimize my open rate and click-through rate. And obviously, people that are doing that, they're not sending through Instantly or G Suite. They've got their own VPS, and sometimes if their emails are getting blocked and not just landing in spam, then they'll rotate the domains and IPs, but generally speaking, they just smash out as many emails as they can with any kind of title or content they want, because they don't care, they know they're going to be in spam. And I think sometimes maybe it can work, because once that guy explained that method to me, I started thinking, well, yeah, I do actually check my spam, because I've had plenty of legitimate senders go in my spam. I've even had companies that manage email reputation land in my spam. So it doesn't surprise me that that can work for some niches. And next we've got churn and burn. So this is basically where you just buy a ton of domains and IPs and you send from one, you wait till it gets flagged, you send from another, you wait till it gets flagged, then you send from another. And you can do this, but you'll be constantly, spam filters are so quick these days to identify people that are, doing cold email that's potentially unwanted, that it's sort of a bit of a frustrating method, I think. And also you have to balance, the revenue your campaign is generating with the cost of constantly renewing, you're cycling through, rotating through domains and IPs. And then finally, it is possible to buy verified, like says Amazon accounts on certain forums on the internet. You can get a says account that can send 50,000 emails per day for about $200 on some forums on the internet. But obviously, you're going to be sending cold emails through an email service provider that is for transactional emails. So you'll be breaking their terms and conditions, and they will flag your account and shut it down. But basically, people buy these accounts, send as many as they can, have their account shut down, then they buy another one. I don't recommend you do that. I don't think it's probably going to scale that well, and it's a bit, it's a bit shady, isn't it? Number 8, let's talk about links. So we'll cover how to manage your links, how to create unique links, how to cloak links, and how to use trusted middle domains. So first thing, I would not send a link on your first email to someone, especially if you're doing cold outreach. There's several reasons for that. Firstly is the spam filters. If you're sending links to people, links are often spammy and sometimes even malicious, and spam filters just don't like them. And also, if you're doing what I term spread sending, where you're sending over multiple domains and each domain has multiple inboxes, if you're sending the same content and the same link, the identical link across all those domains and inboxes, that's a really easy way for spam filters to see that, oh, this person's sending a cold email, the same email, across multiple domains at a scale that just a normal person sending emails wouldn't be doing. So it's probably cold outreach or a bit spammy. So that's a really easy way for them to flag your domain, your email campaign across multiple domains if you're using the exact same link in every email. Now, if you do decide to send a link in the first email or in any of the follow-ups, I would always try and make them as unique as possible. And a really simple way to do that is just to prepend some random thing that does absolutely nothing to the link apart from make it a unique link in every email. So if you're programming your own outreach system, you can do something like just appending a Unix timestamp, or you could even append a hash of the email address or something like that, just so that each link is unique. Now, if you're sending links and you've either previously had some of your links flagged as spammy because the spam filters had followed them and they don't like the content, or even if the content was fine but you just sent too many too quickly, or you sent lots and people flagged them as spam and now you think the domain might be flagged as spammy and that's affecting your deliverability, there are a few strategies you can do to lower those risks of the domain or the content on the domain causing you issues with spam filters, and we'll go over those now. So one thing you can do here is a JavaScript redirect from a trusted domain. So this link here, this is a Google Cloud Platform storage bucket link. And what that means is you've registered for a Google Cloud Platform account, you've created a storage bucket, which is a way of storing things in the cloud, and you've uploaded a file. Now, with this technique, in that file, you'll have a simple JavaScript redirect. So the user will click this link in your email, and they will load the file that's in your bucket, which in this case will be a HTML file with a JavaScript redirect pointing to your website or your offer or whatever, and then they'll be redirected to it when they load that file. And the reason we use a JavaScript redirect is because a lot of spam filters only follow 301 redirects to eventually get to the link's true content. They often don't follow JavaScript redirects because they'd either have to pass those redirects out of HTML, and they're not always in a predictable format, or they'd have to render the page and then the JavaScript would be executed and the link would be followed. But they often don't want to render those pages for loads of different technical reasons that I won't go into. Next, advanced cloaking. Now the first thing I want to say about this, if you're having to go to these sort of lengths, you should probably think, why is my content that I'm linking to been flagged as spammy? But if there's nothing you can do about that, then you can try and do some advanced cloaking. So how this would work is you would link to your website, and if it was a normal user, you just show them your your service or your offer or whatever. But if you think spam filters don't like that service or offer or whatever, and they deem it spammy or something, then you can do some cloaking. And what we mean by that is when the spam filters follow your link in your emails, you can show them something different. You can show them something different to what you'll show the user, and that is called cloaking. And you would do that with something like a PHP script. So you'd send a few emails with links in to a test PHP script. You'd get the IP addresses and the user agents that then check that PHP script, that then follow that link to that PHP script. So you'd grab the spam filters IP address ranges, and then you just put them in a new PHP script that you'll send out in your emails, and when you detect that it's a spam filter checking the content of your link, and you identify it both by those IP address ranges or user agents or whatever, then you redirect it off to content that you think will not be flagged as potentially spammy. But again, if you're having to go to these lengths, you should probably really think, can I make my content less spammy and more, spam filter friendly? And then finally, you can use a trusted middle domain, a domain that is really well trusted. So it's quite normal for people to send out cold emails and not deliberately include a link, but in their signature have links to things like Twitter and Instagram and Facebook. Those domains are so well trusted that I seriously doubt they're going to do much to impact your deliverability of your emails. So one thing you can do is you can use them as a middle domain. So instead of putting a link in your email to your offer on your brand new untrusted website, you can put a link to a tweet or a link to a Facebook post or an Instagram post or something like that. And then if you have a following on there, that's even better because it adds social proof. And those links are far less likely to flag any kind of spam filter. And then, of course, on those posts, you can then link to your offer on your own domain. Now, number 10, something I have seen people do, and to be honest, I wouldn't recommend you do this. I've only seen it really on quite spammy email campaigns. Sometimes people will, instead of using text in their email content like a normal person would, they replace all of the text with an image. And the reason they do that is because if you use an image, you can put text in the image, but the spam filter won't be able to understand the image. So you can show text to the user because it's in the image, and the spam filters won't be able to pass that and see that what you're sending might be something that flags their spam filters. Now, optical character recognition technology is getting so good now, though, that I think if you send the same image thousands of times in the same email campaign, I suspect the spam filters will be reading the text out of that image now. So I wouldn't assume that the spam filters nowadays can't see your text in that image. Something you could potentially do is change the hash of the image each time you do it, and I suspect the spam filters would probably say, this is a different image, I don't want to use the computational power to do OCR on each individual email because there's a different image in every email. Maybe that would work, I'm not sure. But also another con of this method is that even if the spam filter can't understand what's in the image, it means that there's nothing for it to do a spam analysis on. If it can't read the image, and the image is the only thing in the email, then it's probably going to assume, unless you have a really high trust score, that you sent a blank email and there's like a weird reason for that, and it's probably going to make them suspicious. So yeah, this is just a method that I've seen. I wouldn't advise you do it, but I thought I'd just cover it because I've seen people do it. Number 11, clean your emails. So this is so important, especially if you are sending to scraped emails. So if you are sending to a scraped list and you don't clean it, you will send to mail traps, you'll send to email addresses that don't exist, and you'll get a really high bounce rate. And then if Gmail or Hotmail or whatever, if they see that you have a high bounce rate, then it's a strong indication that you are sending to scraped emails, and they don't want you sending to scraped emails. So you should always clean your emails. And obviously, if you clean your scraped email list and you remove 10% of the emails in there, then that's obviously a reduction in your sending costs. So now I'm just going to quickly show you a tool that I built that's free on my website at the moment, because it has all the checks that I've learned to check for when doing email campaigns, especially if you're using scraped emails. So firstly, you want to check for gibberish, because sometimes if people have to enter their email for a ebook or something like that, if they're incentivized to enter their email but they don't really want to give it, but they want what you're offering, they'll often just put two fingers on the keyboard and mash something in like that. So we're going to check for gibberish emails. We're also going to check for commonly scraped emails. So I downloaded the home page and contact page of pretty much, well, of literally hundreds of thousands of websites, and I looked at the most common emails, and that gave me a big list of emails that are left in like default WordPress templates, for example. And they're things like your@website.com, you@yourdomain.com. So you're obviously going to bounce if you email those email addresses, because they just don't exist. They're just left in CMS templates for people to replace, and then they use a template and they don't replace them, and then you scrape them. Next, rude word check. So that's pretty obvious again. If somebody has to put their email address in for something they don't want to, they might put some naughty words in there, so we'll check with that. Then valid email. Often people do actually want to put their valid email address in, but they'll accidentally press the wrong key on the keyboard and they'll put an invalid character in. So we'll check that the emails are valid and they don't have any characters that just aren't accepted in email addresses. Next, temporary check. So we pull down a huge list of domains that are used as temporary disposable domains. So again, sometimes somebody will want to get access to something, or they'll need to verify an account or something like that, or they want your ebook but they don't want you to have their email, and they will go and register a disposable temporary email address and put that in. So we check our emails against this big list we have of those domains. Next, resolves check. So basically, if you have an email address, you probably don't want to send to it unless it is unless it has a valid domain. For example, if you have john@cheese.com, you want cheese.com to load and be a website, because if it doesn't load, there's a strong chance that it's not a valid email address. Next, we're going to do an MX record check. So what that means is we're going to check that the domain in the email address that we're sending to is configured in a way where its DNS entries allow it to receive email. So if we try and send to a domain that has no MX records set up, we probably know that domain isn't used for email, and the email would probably bounce. So we'll start our little email clean, and you can see that very quickly got us 6 bad emails, which we can open up now, and it'll give us the reasons of why they failed. the check. There you see failed gibberish check, contains rude word. That fake domain we put in doesn't resolve to a real website, and it doesn't have MX records set up for email. That one's a disposable email. That one is a commonly scraped email. That one's a commonly scraped email too. Now, one final thing I want to discuss about cleaning emails is you may notice on my checker that we don't connect to the email server of the recipient's address. So, for example, the email address is james@gmail.com. We don't connect to gmail.com and see if the server will receive email for james@gmail.com. And that's deliberate, because what I found while testing that and testing other services that do that is that the email servers, after a certain amount of connection attempts to check if an email was valid, but without sending to the email, these email servers would work out, oh, this IP address is connected 100 times, but it's not sent anything. It just keeps checking if it's valid or not. And then they work out what's going on. You know, and what they'll do is they'll tell you that an email address isn't valid because they know that you're just connecting to see if they're valid or not. So they will tell you an email address is invalid. And obviously, if you upload a big list, you don't want those web servers, even a small amount of them, telling you that a valid email is invalid, because that could be, you know, a sale or a new contract that you're missing out on because you didn't email a valid email, because when you cleaned the list, it told you that it wasn't valid. Okay, number 12, flawless content. So this is kind of obvious, but I thought I'd just say it anyway. If you get an email out of the blue, people are automatically suspicious, and they're often kind of irritated as well, let's be honest. So you have to do everything you can to make your email flawless. Okay, you have to check spelling, grammar, punctuation. You want the size of your image, the crispness of your image, all to be absolutely perfect. And I'll give you an example of something really stupid and funny that I did once that's very easy to do. So a few years back, I sent out an email to people who had signed up to a little micro SaaS I had. I sent out about 50,000 emails asking if people wanted a free trial of another SaaS that I had that was quite related to it, so there was good crossover there. I spell checked the email, I read it, thought it was great, sent it out, and then I realized a few days later that I'd sent an email to 50,000 people asking if they wanted a free trail and not a free trial. That was very embarrassing, and obviously the spell checkers didn't flag that because it was spelled correctly. So that's why you must always double check everything, and also understand that when someone opens your cold email, they're probably slightly annoyed and suspicious of you already. So don't give them any reasons to not respond or delete your email. So when doing cold outreach, having an unsubscribe link is really important, because it's not just because well, in most countries you legally have to give them, well, not necessarily an unsubscribe link, but you have to give them a way of opting out. And the easiest way to do that is an unsubscribe link. And also, an unsubscribe link will lower your complaint rates, because if you cold email someone and often it can invoke an emotion in them, and a lot of people want to immediately respond to that emotion. And what a lot of people will do is they will delete your email, and that is not good for your deliverability rate, because email providers like Gmail will look at the engagement, how people engage with emails, and they'll see, oh, this person's emails always get deleted, so that's not a good that's not going to help your deliverability. Also, there's a strong chance that if they're annoyed, they might block you and report you as spam, which is really not what you want, because it's those user spam reports that can, really do damage to your domain or your IP's reputation. So you need to give the user something to do when they're annoyed, and the best thing to give them is an unsubscribe link. Now, the other great thing about unsubscribe links is that it's another opportunity to sell to them, give them a pitch for your product or your service outside of an email format, because they obviously have to click that link. They'll come through to your website. Now, obviously, if you're sending through a system where the unsubscribe takes you to that system, then you're probably not going to be able to do as much of this as you could compared to your own bespoke coded system, but still you can probably do some of it. So when they click through to unsubscribe, you can give them another offer, offer them a promo code if you're selling something, a discount code. If it's a service, offer a slightly different pitch for your service. And then when they do decide that they want to be unsubscribed and they click the here's my preferences, save, guess what, that's another page load. So that's a third attempt you've got there at selling something or offering something or getting an introduction with this person. So yeah, that's often not fully used. It's a technique that not many people take advantage of. And also, when you switch from email to web, because they're reading your email, they click unsubscribe, they're now on your website, you can do a lot more things. You can start playing a video. It's easier to show dynamically loaded in review scores and testimonials from review sites. You can have more social proof. You can show stuff from Instagram and stuff if you've got followers that show that you are a legitimate company with a solid product to offer. And something else you can do on an unsubscribe page is offer them alternative channels to be contacted through. So sometimes people, and I've done this, unsubscribe from a list or cold outreach or whatever, because they might actually be interested in your niche or what you're offering, but they just don't like getting emails from people when it's things that they're not, that aren't serious. Some people have their their emails for all their serious stuff, and then anything else they have on their social feed. So sometimes in some niches they might prefer to hear from you through a social channel. So for some niches you can offer them that opportunity. You can be like, okay, well, you don't want to get emails from us, that's fine, but do you want to follow us on the social here? And some people will do that. So that's another thing you can try. So number 14, split test everything. You wouldn't believe the difference that just the smallest tweak can make to a campaign. So you want to obviously split test your subjects in your emails. That's probably definitely the top 3 things to test. Some people, they put in emojis, they try all different kinds of things. Obviously you want to test your content in your email, so your pitch, your offer, try different products, try giveaways, try changing your call to action. There's so many different things you can test. Try split testing your send times. Obviously you don't want your email to be part of the Monday morning big batch of catch-up emails. People just won't have time. You want it to land, well, for every niche it's best to do your own testing, but something like Wednesday afternoon is normally pretty good. And obviously that's going to change. If you're doing B2B, you're going to aim for office hours. If you're doing B2C, then it's pretty good to get an email in the evening when they're just sat there watching TV and it pops up on their phone and they're kind of bored. That's a good time for B2C. So another thing you can test, the from name. So when they see who the email is from, will you get a better response if it comes from your business name or from your personal name? That depends. Depends on your niche, and that's for you to test. I'll tell you something funny that someone I know used to do. They used to extract the second name from the email address and then use that in the from name. So if you had quite a rare second name and you got an email from someone that had the same second name as you, that immediately gets you interested, because at first you think, did I just accidentally email myself? Hang on, let me open this and check. And also, like, it's completely plausible that that person might genuinely have the same second name as you. So obviously that caused him issues sort of down the road a little bit, but you know, you can get really creative with these things. Yeah, so that's just a funny story I thought I'd share. Next, you can test your Gmail profile picture. So if you're sending through G Suite to Gmail, which if you're doing B2C, loads of people have Gmail addresses now. They're absolutely huge. You can test your profile picture. You know, if you send from your company logo, it's probably not going to do as well as if you put your own face on there, especially if you have, you know, how should I put it, a likable face. So that's something to test. Again, test your links. There might be certain structures. Sometimes they get flagged as looking spammy. For example, if it's like /free-offer or something like that, something to test. We covered earlier gender extraction from email addresses. So splitting your emails between genders can do absolute wonders for some niches. That's definitely something to test. And it's always nice to know who is emailing you, so you can test having your profile picture in your signature. That often helps, you know, it feels a lot more personal then. So there's so many things you can test, and even if every time you do a split test you only get, you know, 1% difference, you know, you can do like 50 split tests and just, you know, you can make such a big difference to your open rates and your click-through rates. So split test everything, and it's an ongoing process as well. So yeah, just test everything. Number 15 is a pretty obvious one. If you're sending cold emails, especially if you're using scraped emails, monitor spam detection services. So there's tons of websites out there. You put your domain in or your IP address in, and they'll tell you if there's any spam filters that have flagged your domain or IP address. And here's a really quick example of one. I've just entered an IP in there I know is spammy, and you can see it's told us that it's on this particular spam list and given you like a rough idea of why. And finally, something else I think people should do is check your links in your emails to see if they've been flagged as malicious. Now, obviously, you shouldn't be sending anything that is malicious. That is illegal, immoral. Do not do that, okay? But sometimes what happens is, if someone at a company gets an email they're not expecting and it contains a link, there's so much cybersecurity training nowadays that most medium to large companies now have a feature in their email client to report an email as a phishing email, and they're often given cybersecurity training to do that, to basically say if anything comes in that looks suspicious, that has a link, flag it as malicious, as phishing. And that all gets fed back to Microsoft, for example, and if you send enough out of the blue emails with links and enough people flag them as malicious, then it's eventually going to affect your deliverability for emails with that link in. So, number 16, follow-ups. Now, follow-up emails can be highly effective because sometimes if it's a cold email, you're really low down right at the bottom of people's priority lists, and that's just a fact. They don't owe you anything, they don't know who you are, you're emailing them out of the blue, you're right at the bottom of the things that they care about in that moment. Sounds harsh, but it's the truth. So, something you can do is to keep following up. Send them one email, and then send them another and another and another. So generally, up to 5 emails works. I wouldn't send more than 5 because it will increase your complaint rates if you do. Remember to give them a way to opt out if you're doing follow-ups, because if they don't, as I said before, if you keep emailing them, keep annoying them, and you don't give them a way to opt out, they'll report you as spam. Now, a few little things you can do. So I would always include the past emails, so it reminds them that you've already emailed them, that you'll keep emailing, that you're chasing them for an answer, so that you're persistent, all that. Include the past emails so they can see that. Rotate your offer and pitch. So they already know who you are if they've read the first email, so you don't need to necessarily include a huge introduction again. You can make the follow-up emails smaller, but definitely change the pitch, the offer or the product each time, because they might be you might get lucky and they might show a particular desire for a product that's different than the first one you tried to sell them or offer or whatever service. Something else that works well on your final follow-up, so your 5th email or something like that, send what's called a breakup email. Just say, I've tried to get hold of you, I can't, I'm not going to email you again. And the reason you do that is because sometimes people will read your cold email and they will actually be interested, but they just won't have time to respond back because, like I said, you're so low down their priority list. But if you send a breakup email, it sort of invokes a sense of urgency a little bit, and that might get them to respond then. So that's one technique that often works quite well. So 17, all the common sense parts of email marketing. So when you email someone out of the blue, offer them value. Don't just be like, hey, here's my product, I want your money, please come and buy it, here's a link. That's just not going to work, okay? You've got to offer them something really good. You've got to say, would you like this free course? Would you like this free audit of your website? Offer them something that is genuinely valuable to them, that's going to make them more money or make their life easier. Offer them real value. So next, social proof. So if you have a legit business, you should have people that are willing to show proof that they think your business is good. That is the simplest way to put it. So that social proof can be in many forms. That could be followers on Twitter or Instagram. It could be positive things on your Facebook page. It could be review site scores and testimonials. Anything like that. Every time you have a positive interaction with a client or a customer, get them to leave some sort of social proof that you can provide to your next prospects. Because if you are cold emailing out of the blue, you need to give them, the people you're emailing, a way of knowing that you are trustable, that you are going to do what you say, you are going to send them the product, you are going to give them the service that they pay for. They need that proof. So a clear CTA, clear call to action. So I've had cold emails in the past from people, and it looks like they have a really good product, they're a really solid, legit company, but they've just told me about their product and then they've left it at that. there's no call to action there. What do I do? What if I want this product? Do I type in their website into Google and find their contact form? And I can't bother to do that. I'm busy and this is a cold email. You know what I mean? Like, you've got to be a clear call to action. So you've got to tell them about your product or service, and then be like, if you want to proceed, do this. And that thing that you're asking them to do has to be as simple as possible. There has to be no barriers there at all. So an example of a call to action done badly might be to say, here's my product, this is a bit about my company. The call to action is to click this link and fill out this form. And, they click the link, and then the form is like massive. And then, the last bit of information you take on the form is the most important bit, their telephone number. So that is a bad call to action. A good call to action, would be simply to ask them to click a link and then fill out a tiny form to schedule a callback. And one of the first bits of information you take on the form is their number. So that's a much better and clearer CTA. Now, another thing you can do when you send cold emails is to invoke a sense of urgency, but don't, it's a balance somewhere in the middle. So you want to invoke a sense of urgency, but not without it being spammy. So an example of it being spammy would be, flash sale, you can only get this product if you buy it within the next 24 hours, blah, blah. That feels a bit spammy, doesn't it? A bit cheap. A better sense of urgency would be something like, I'm doing a beta test on a new piece of software I have, and I've got 10 spaces left. Would you be interested? That's a completely legit offering that invokes a sense of urgency, but it's not spammy. The person receiving that might be like, oh wow, I'm going to get, a free product here, if I reply to this email. So that's a good example of invoking that urgency, but without it feeling like really spammy. So next, be a person. So what I mean by that is, if some big corporation cold emails you, you're not really gonna probably be that interested. But if someone emails you who feels like a warm, likable person, you're far less likely to mark them as spam, and you're far more likely to reply to them, if they feel like if it feels like it's a genuine person that's reaching out to you, rather than just some massive company. So, be a person when you cold email. And, you can even tell people a little bit about your story, your personal story behind your business, things like that really do work. So next, on the first email, don't sell. Wait till you get at least wait till you get a reply till you start trying to sell. People don't like to feel like they've been sold to, do they? Some people, it can make them quite angry if they feel like they have some random salesperson emailing them trying to, get their money and take their time. That's how they'll see it, So don't sell straight away. Your first email should focus on what you can offer them, without taking too much of their time and their money, or ideally taking any of it. What can you offer them for free that is of genuine value that they'll want to respond to your email about? So I've already briefly touched on the final two, but I'll just say it again because it's so important. Customization is really important with cold emailing. The more you can customize an email, not only will that help avoid spam filters, but the more effort it looks like you've put into a cold email, the more likely someone is to reply. If you get an email and it's completely customized to your company, it's an email that knows everything about your company, it knows even your tech stack, it's seen things on your social, like those sort of emails, like most people won't think that they can be automatically generated, but they can. So people will really notice those. They'll stand out from the rest of the junk and the cold email they're getting, and people will reply to them. And finally, I covered this already really, but get a reply first before you start selling. And one of the reasons that that is good is because spam filters look at your look at the engagement of your emails. They look at how people interact with your emails. And if you're sending loads of cold emails, even if they're, for an amazing product, but if your pitch is slightly off and people they're either ignoring your email or they're opening it and deleting it, then even if they're not marking it spam, those are not good engagement signals with your email, and that might cause you deliverability issues. So try and get a reply, and don't sell. Get a reply, because that looks really good to the spam filters. If people are replying to your initial email, that's a really good engagement signal, and it will really help your deliverability. And then once you get the reply, then you can slowly, book an appointment or start selling or whatever. So that concludes the video. Big thank you for watching. Hope you found it useful. I do realize it has been quite technical, so hopefully everyone followed. But I've been doing this for 15 years in the IM space, mix of SEO, social, email marketing. I've sent millions of emails. So hopefully this big knowledge dump has been useful for you. I've got loads more videos coming out in the IM space, so please like and subscribe. Thank you.